1981, after I had been at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory for over 10 years as a guest scientist, publishing papers on what we're talking about tonight, bringing out to the scientific community the evidence for creation, and virtually getting no refutation. The laboratory was letting me remain year after year and year after year because I was publishing these papers, not because I was publishing the papers per se, but because the papers were being published and the personnel at the laboratory could see there was no refutation. They could see these articles were being published in the world's esteemed scientific journals, and there were no evolutionists that were being able to shoot the evidence down. So I went to this trial, and over here on the left-hand corner you can see the people who came to the trial, the scientists who came to the trial for the evolutionist position, and on the right, the scientists who came to the trial for creation. What happened is, earlier, in the early part of 1981, the state of Arkansas had passed a law requiring the teaching of creation science in the public schools. The ACLU challenged that law, and I was asked to come and testify about the scientific evidence that I had been publishing. Well, my wife and I prayed about it, and if something happened to indicate that's exactly what I should do. I should go and testify. I realized, however, that in doing this, it was going to go out not just to the scientific community now, it was going out to the world. And I had a pretty good idea that the laboratory management was going to take a very dim view, because throughout the scientific community, they had, in a sense, tolerated me being there at that laboratory, saying all these things about the evidence showing that indeed the Earth was formed very, very rapidly, that it's very, very young. This is something that doesn't exist. A scientist came over from Germany one day and came up to talk to me, and as a result of that, he went back and talked to the chemistry division director. I was in the chemistry division. He went back and told the chemistry division director after he talked to me. He said, you know, if Gentry lived in Russia, he was a German scientist, well known. He said, if Gentry lived in Russia, this is now about 1979 or thereabouts, 78, he would be shot. In other words, if a man such as myself were to go and try to find and publish something in Russia at that particular time, he was saying to the chemistry division director, I would be shot. He said, in Germany, if he were over here doing the work here in Germany, which, you know, I'm the head of a big laboratory myself, if he were here in Germany, he would starve. In other words, nobody, he would not support my work, no one would support my work, regardless of these reports. He said, only here in America, with you, meaning the chemistry division director, is Gentry able to do the work that he's done and get these papers published. I know what the answer was for me being able to stay there that long. That was the God of heaven intervening to help me use the marvelous facilities of the laboratory and the friendship of the people of the laboratory for a long period of time to get these results out to the world. Well, what happened here at the Arkansas Creation Trial, it turns out, I'll mark here on the screen, the gentleman, Brent Dalrymple, who was there to testify for an ancient age of the earth. He was one of the world's eminent geologists. He was there to testify and to affirm, you know, ancient earth, so therefore evolution of the earth, evolution of life had to have happened. And that's exactly what he did. And yours truly, of course, at that particular time, I'm down here on the lower right. You can see I'm flashing the light up there. That's where I was, and along with several others who came to testify for creation. But remember we said that Brent Dalrymple was an eminent scientist? David, what happened there in March 2005?
In 2005, we see that Brent Dalrymple was given a National Medal of Science from President Bush. And the reason we show this slide is basically just to try to show people that Brent Dalrymple is somebody that, you know, had made a lot of contributions to science and was recognized by President Bush with this medal. But in the process of making these contributions to science, he also wrote some letters which were used. Are they going to be showing next here?
We'll be showing those later on. Then.
He wrote some letters. We're going to be seeing some of those letters in a minute that actually give an indication of what he feels like is wrong with the Genesis movement, as he calls it.
But right now at the trial, Brent Dalrymple was testifying. Now this is what the judge, the Attorney General, Assistant Attorney General David Williams, Brent Dalrymple was on the witness stand, and he was, for example, like right here. And the judge, Overton, was right here. And he was being cross-examined by David Williams, who was standing almost 5 or 10 feet from Brent Dalrymple, who was sitting in the witness stand. And he was going through a series of questions of Brent Dalrymple, trying to find out exactly more. Brent Dalrymple had already testified about the ancient age of the earth and on and on and on. In fact, he said that people who believed in creation and the young age of the earth were, guess what? They were like flat earthers. In other words, they were really off track. But the Assistant Attorney General, David Williams, got around to asking him about my work. And he said, Dr. Dalrymple, what about Robert Gentry's work? And this is what he had to say. On the witness stand there with a full course of the audience and the judge listening, and also it's in record of the trial itself, and it's copied there in my book if you're ever interested in reading. Go ahead.
Right, it's part of the trial transcript. Basically, Brent Dalrymple's explanation of the polonium halo research, he states this. He says, also in Gentry's work, he proposed a very tiny mystery, which is balanced on the other side by an enormous amount of evidence. Notice the similarity between what the National Academy of Sciences said in its booklet, Science and Creationism, or Frank Press's letter response to Dad, where he says, I don't see how one piece of data can balance the overwhelming information on the other side. And here, Brent Dalrymple is saying the exact same thing. A tiny mystery balanced on the other side by an enormous amount of evidence, but he does think it's important to know what the answer to that little mystery is. And for most people, I'll just tell you this, most people, the answer to that little mystery is simple. It was formed by some uranium precursor which has, millions of year half-life. That's their answer. That's the only answer they can come up with. And that answer was refuted by the published papers. But anyway, the rest of his thing, he says, he's trying to explain now exactly what is this little mystery. He says, if you have a granitic body, a rock that comes from the melt, that contains this mica, and it cools down, it takes millions of years like that for a body to cool, so that by the time the body cooled, the body of rock is what he's referring to here, all the polonium would have decayed. What happened to the Alka-Seltzer tablet a minute after it was put in the glass? It decays away. All the activity from the tablet is gone. Once it's gone, can you capture the activity of the tablet fizzing in the water? No. Once it's gone, it's gone. The same thing with the polonium halos. So that by the time the body cooled, all the polonium would have decayed, since it has an extremely short half-life of the order of minutes. Therefore, there would be no polonium in the body to cause the polonium halos. So what Gentry is saying, this is primordial polonium. In other words, primordial polonium, not polonium derived from uranium. And that was the subject of all these papers. Therefore, the granite mass in which it occurs could not have cooled slowly. Therefore, it must have been created by fiat instantly. The essence of what really is behind the research on the polonium halos is not that difficult to grasp. What's difficult to grasp is what follows in train if you accept that scientific evidence. And that is basically you can no longer have long ages. You can't have your long ages for the rocks to form. You can't even have your long ages prior to the formation of life. You can't have it. And it kind of makes common sense a little bit, because if you really believe that the 6 days of creation are literally occurred like they are stated in the Bible, it's not hard to accept the fact that God on day one of creation week spoke the earth into existence, just like on day 4 of creation week, God created the lesser light and the greater light. Oh yeah, he made the stars too. So if you really want to believe that the earth is billions of years old, you've got to also believe that the sun and the moon and the solar system are billions of years old. But that all flies in the face to the plain word of the Bible. To say then that, well, somehow there was a shroud, which was covering the moon and covering the sun, takes away from the literal wording of the verse when it says he made two great lights, the lesser light to rule the night, the greater light to rule the day. You can also go into the Greek and try to look at the origins of the words, but to me, it makes sense in English. I mean, I can read it in English and I can figure out what's going on. I can read the fourth commandment in English, and it says, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is. Revelation 14, worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the fountains of waters. It's very simple. God wants to draw our attention to the fact that he is the creator. If we take away any of that, we're diluting what the plain word of the Bible is saying, period. Why do we want to do that?
David, let's ask this question. This man is an eminent geologist, world-renowned and so forth, and there he is testifying that, and there's a room full of reporters and everything. It got some coverage, but for all practical purposes, the people who were there, the writers and so forth, the reporters who were there, minimized the fact that indeed this evidence was being presented there, something in the rock that formed very, very